Good afternoon, everyone. Those of us here at the Aurelia Kelly Primary School auditorium in Stony Ground, Anguilla. I want to acknowledge the presence of the Commissioner for Social Development, Ms. Laureen Gomes, as well as Principal of the Albina Lake Hodge Comprehensive School, Mrs. Rita Celestine Carty, as well as the members of the Department of Social Development and other guests who are here. Also Dr. Niquia Hughes, OT specialist here in Anguilla, as well as others, and especially to those joining us via Clean Stream and UE Open Campus social media. We are so happy that you are joining us for this information, educational awareness building session this afternoon. It is in celebration of Social Work Month 2022. And we are again joining with the Social Development Department in the Ministry of Social Development to bring another educational awareness session. Last year, we would have partnered with the team and to build awareness among our students about what factors and aspects of the department were there for operations. And this year, we thought that we would join with the department to expand the reach, and in particular, one of the issues that they are trying to get all of us aware of is the Child Protection Act. And so this afternoon, we are so pleased to be able to join with the team to bring this information so that all of us on Anguilla and beyond are aware of this important document that governs the operations here in Anguilla in regards to our children. So for those of you who are joining by social media, we are particularly grateful to Clean Stream for affording this opportunity, because ultimately the aim of having legislation is so that all of us are aware of it and all of us that can act on it, because ignorance is no excuse when it comes to the law. And so without further ado, I'm going to invite Ms. Gomes, the Commissioner at the Social Development Department, to bring some remarks as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Phyllis Fleming-Banks did such an excellent job. There's really not much more for me to say, but I would like to extend thanks. I will adopt the protocol she already established for everyone who's here and present during via Clean Stream. We're very happy to have you. This is a very important discussion. Every year, Social Work Month is celebrated in March, and social work is one of the fastest growing professions. So we want to bring awareness to this profession and everything that guides our work. This year, social workers celebrate under the international theme, Co-Building a New Eco-Social World, Leaving No One Behind. This theme highlights the opportunity for the social work profession to engage all networks and the community we work within to make contributions to the values and principles which enable all people to have their dignity respected through shared futures. The Department of Social Development continues to work with partners locally, regionally, and internationally, and today we are delighted to be partnering with UE on this session. Now I'm going to leave it to my able-bodied colleagues from the Family and Social Services Unit. We have our supervisor, Mrs. Angelina Carty, Ms. Colin Webster. Two of the other members couldn't make it today, but they're with us, hopefully via Clean Stream. And I'm going to let them continue with this discussion. We have a lot to talk about, so let us get straight to it.
Good afternoon. I'd like to adopt the protocols that have already been established. As I was already introduced, my name's Angelina Carty, and I'm going to lead us through this presentation with regards to the Child Protection Act. And it has been coined Learning to Act. My colleague, who I usually do this in tandem with, unfortunately Ms. Brittany Christopher, is unable to be here, and she has the lead with regards to child protection when it comes to our unit and the department. So this is a presentation we've put together. I'm not going to go through the Act section by section like that. I wanted to mix it up a little bit, so there'll be questions and things that we'll be asking and answering, and equally from the floor as we go on, if you feel that you want to interject and ask a question, please feel free to do that. But before I proceed, for those of you who are in the audience right now, I'd just like to ask a question. It may seem like a stupid question, but what do you think should be in an act that's called child protection? What kind of things do you think might be in there? Anybody? And don't leave me standing here by myself doing all the talking, okay? Things to protect children. Spot on. Anything else? I mean, that is spot on. It is about our children. Okay, so let me just give you a little background to this act. The Child Protection Act 2019 for Anguilla stems from OECS Child Bill. So across the region, there was a bill that was given so as the different countries could look at how they adapted the act, adapted it so as it could become an act in their particular territory, so that it would be looking at protecting children. So they've got slightly different names, but Anguilla has called it the Child Protection Act. The Act explicitly provides a legal framework for working with and protecting and promoting the well-being of children. In line with the international standards of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, commonly known as CRC, laid out in Objects of the Act, Section 20. Now, I took the liberty of bringing the Act that we have printed in our department that can be shared around those who are in the audience right now, so you can flick through to get an idea of what it looks like, its volume, okay? A lot of people are aware of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, and it does feed into the Act, and different things, as you'll see as we go along. So the layout of the Act comprises of 13 parts with 118 sections, which is one of the reasons why I didn't go section to section, because we'd be here for a very long time. So the first part is the preliminary, and that speaks to the interpretations of different words that might be in it, but it just gives you the basics of things within there. And part 2 is the administration of the Act, and like it says, how it is that the Act would be used. Part 3 is the Child Safeguarding Board, and that's where the ministry, alongside with the commissioner and different agency, a multidisciplinary team, come together in terms of looking at the well-being of children and what other instruments we might need to have in place or resources to further protect children. We have parental responsibility because we can't move away from the fact that children have parents, and the purpose of this act is to help parents. It's about partnership, to help parents be able to look after children, and where they're having difficulties, to support them doing that. Care and protection of children. Unfortunately, what we find in all jurisdictions, we have instances where children need additional protection, and this particular act helps us to be able to do that, and you'll see as we move along. Reporting, a very big one, and I know a number of agencies that we interact with, and people are concerned about the whole concept of reporting. Now, you'll hear from my very broad English accent that I wasn't originally from Anguilla, so I did practice in the UK, and reporting is a major thing. It's a requirement in the UK, and certainly in the US I'm aware of that. It is also a requirement here, which we'll speak to in a little bit. Investigation and assessment, because part of protecting children is that we do have to investigate situations and make an assessment in terms of how we move forward with the information we gather. Emergency protection, because sometimes we've got to act now for now in terms of protecting children. Assessment orders, and it is what it says, orders for the care and protection of children, childcare services. In Anguilla, you may be aware that we have a place of safety for children, so it speaks to that within the Act. Court applicants, and then we also have Part 13, which is miscellaneous. So if you're not quite sure where else to put it, we put it under miscellaneous. So moving on in terms of the principles of the Act, which is in Section 3. Throughout the Act, it refers to the child's best interests and the highest level of, paramountcy that must be placed on the child's well-being. So the emphasis is on the child. What is best for that child and the individual child? What might be best for one may not be the best for the other. So that includes elements of child safety and the level of risk, parents' capacity, appropriate care for child's physical, mental, and emotional needs, ascertainable wishes and feelings of the child. All the way through, we must speak to the child about what it is that they want. I don't know if you remember being a child. I certainly do, and I think I'm one of the elders in the room. And I can remember that I wanted to say things, and in terms of my care or what was going on, I grew up in an era where you shall be seen and not heard. We're moving away from that, and the Child Protection Act certainly employs that because it stems, like I said earlier, from the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. So the child's voice is important. A secure environment for the child, existing ties between child and others, so contact in relation to that child, wherever they may be, with significant people is extremely important for that child. So having mentioned child, who is a child? Because sometimes people get a little bit confused in terms of ages and moving away from the original Juvenile Act, which had elements of child protection in it. The ages were sometimes a little bit confusing. But in this Act, it makes it very clear. Under Part 1, preliminary interpretation, a child means a person who is under the age of 18, which is also aligned with the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child that I mentioned earlier, ratified by Anguilla under the UK as an overseas territory in September 1994. Some people get confused because that number 16 often comes in, but I thought that they could do everything that they want. Unfortunately, from where I'm standing, it's a personal viewpoint, 16 is only to do with the age of consent for sex. I think it's too low on a personal level, but that's the way that the law stands at the moment. So there's a little bit of a contradiction, but they're still children under the age of 18. So the child's participation and rights. Throughout the Act, child's rights and participation are referred to, bearing in mind child's maturity and circumstance. Remember I said earlier on, all children are different. So you could have 2 7-year-olds, but they're very different in terms of where they are, their learning ability, etc. So Section 5 speaks to conditions of life. Section 15, child's participation. You hear it again. Section 33, child informed about receiving counseling. Section 35, child's wishes. And Section 76, 4, child interviewed. So all the way along you're seeing we're having to speak to the child about different things that are pertaining to them and informing them about what's happening. Not that you're just going here, but this is a process that's going to take place, and answering their questions. So the mandate of the Department of Social Development, which is where I work in the unit, Family and Social Services, whereby we have the responsibility in our unit for dealing with child protection. That's one aspect of the work that we do. So Section 8 states, legally mandated child protection agency. That's what we are as the department, as said in the Act. And assume lead responsibility for ensuring the protocol enhances the well-being and protection of children and their families. Okay? So all the way along when we're working in relation to child protection, we recognize that children should be in a family where at all possible. And we work the best way that we can to try and reintegrate children into their families if the need arises to remove them in the first place. So adopt a multidisciplinary approach utilizing specific interagency guidelines and strategies. So when we talk about multidisciplinary, we work with the schools, we work with the police, we work with the health authority in terms of ensuring the well-being of children. Collaborate with and assist relevant agencies in all areas concerning child protection in Anguilla. So this is specific to Anguilla, but very similar in other jurisdictions. So medical exemption of a child, examination, of a child, Section 18. Where there is suspicion of harm to a child, medical exam must be done by a medical expert trained to detect and diagnose harm. So it's not any doctor who's in A&E that we would be connecting with. We do have our doctor here. We usually, in the main, I don't think that she'll mind, use Dr. Singh, who provides that service. So then we look at information sharing, very important aspect. Section 19. Information sharing with a child must be open and transparent. And that's really based on the level of where the child is in terms of communicating that information. However, information sharing with other agency and parents or guardians will be disseminated on a need-to-know basis. We're in a culture, this climate, where it's quite small, and people oftentimes think that they have the right to know information about everything that's going on as soon as it's happening. We can be out with a child and they see the child, what's happening to you, and expect you to answer. Or the children might be with a care worker who's at the place of safety and they're curious as to why that's happening. Why are they with them? We wouldn't be at liberty to be sharing information. It's not necessary. We have to change that culture a little bit. Section 20, protected health information. So health providers have a legal obligation to safeguard the medical records of a child under this Act. Children over the age of 13 must provide consent before certain information is shared with their parents or agencies. Very controversial, I know, but there are some things that children feel that they don't want their parents to know about straight away. But oftentimes when we're dealing with the situations, we are saying to them in their best interests that it may be necessary for us to do that. So objective of the Safeguarding Board, I mentioned them earlier, there's a whole part in relation to that. Section 23 explains that safeguard and promote the welfare of children in Anguilla. Keep children safe from harm. Coordinate and ensure the effectiveness of what is done by persons on the board and the purpose of safeguarding and promoting the welfare of children. And this board meets monthly to discuss these matters. So it's not, this act has been enacted and there's no more to be done. things move all the time, things evolve, and certainly this Act will evolve. I talked about parent and the necessity of us working in partnership, but what is parental responsibility? So Section 26 within the Act states that it means the duties, powers, and responsibilities and authority, and includes the rights and obligations which by any law enforced in Anguilla, the parent of the child has in relation to that child. Sounds very long-winded. So we have to make sure that parents who have got the responsibility of the child, we generally use the word custody of the child, that we must be working in partnership with them so that we make sure that we meet the best interests of children that we're working with. So where parents are unmarried, that sometimes can be a little ticklish, the mother will have parental responsibility of the child or custody. That's an immediate right that the mother has by virtue that she's given birth. You can't say that she's not the mother if she's given birth, whereas there could be a question with regards to the father. So parental responsibility does not authorize parents or guardians to act in any manner that will oppose the rights or well-being of a child. So because a parent thinks, well, you should always wear blue, not just because they're the parent, does that necessarily mean that you always have to do that. And oftentimes we've heard people say, but it's my child. But your child does have rights. So sometimes people say, well, when is a child in need of care and protection? So Section 29 says that a child is in need of care and protection where the child is likely to suffer or is suffering harm. And for those of you who understand a little more about child protection, what are some of those issues? We talk about if that child is being abused physically, well, emotionally comes under all of them, but physically, sexually, I think that those are the ones that are immediate ones, and then emotionally comes with all of them, okay? So if we know that that child is, within significant harm in those areas, we know that that child needs protecting in some shape or form, and we will have interventions at different levels as a result. Now, we've had parents who have come to us before now, and they really don't know what to do where their child's concerned. They're doing everything within their power to help this child, and they're having problems. Does this Act cover it? Yes. So parents can ask for help. Under Section 30, parents may seek assistance from the department if there's a serious or persistent conflict between the parent and the child, or the parent is unable to provide adequate supervision for the child to the extent where the child's safety, well-being, or welfare is in jeopardy. The department will provide any available support to assist the child and the family. That word available needs to be looked at. We're a small society, and there are lots of resources that we're in the process of developing. But the biggest resource is us as people and the parents. So working in partnership with them helps us to be able to look at what kind of support we need to give for that particular issue that we're confronted with. It's not just all down to the Department of Social Development. So earlier on, I would have talked about reporting and it being a major issue for a lot of people. However, in that Act, there is a section that speaks to mandatory reporting, and that's Section 31. And it's any person over the age of 18 years who has knowledge or reasonable grounds to suspect that a child is being harmed or is otherwise in need of care and protection must, without delay, make a report to the Department of Social Development, okay? And by extension, you can also report to the police because they have a safeguarding, unit, and that unit will also take reports, which will also be filtered into us. So you can see that this act is not just putting the responsibility on the department, because sometimes we get calls and people are saying, oh, but this is happening to Mary, etc., etc., and y'all ain't doing nothing about it. Hold on a minute, we don't necessarily know. Okay, we need the department to be we need the community to be working in conjunction with the department to let us know about issues that are taking place. And we understand it can be a difficult position to be in. Could be your neighbor, it could be your sister, you know, a family member. But let me talk about what would happen if you do not respect and report suspected child abuse. So under section 31(4), any person who fails to comply with the mandatory reporting commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $5,000 or to imprisonment for 3 months. Weighty, but I believe necessary to get across the message that we are the eyes and ears for children as well, and we're their voice, okay? And if you're doing it in goodwill, honesty, there's not a problem with doing that. And people can receive, can pass on information anonymously, okay? So your name doesn't have to be given. So are persons protected who make reports that are unfounded? The answer is yes. Under section 33, all persons who make reports in good faith are protected by this act, and their identity is kept confidential, okay? So we're not always just looking at confidentiality in relation to the child, but also people who may report, and we need people to be working with us. Why are initial investigations necessary? So you hear the word initial. They're paramount. According to section 34 of the Act, the commissioner, who delegates to social workers, determines whether no further action is necessary, a further investigation is necessary, the removal of a child is necessary, or an application for a care order is necessary to protect the child. And let me just say something with regards to commissioner that you see throughout the Act. Doesn't just mean Ms. Gums goes and has to do all of these things herself, okay? These responsibilities are delegated to the social workers. So myself and members of our unit and the other social workers who are there oftentimes have to deal with the cases on an ongoing basis. So according to the Act, it is delegated to us through the commissioner, who has ultimate responsibility. So how are investigations normally done? Now you'll see a flow chart there. What we would do is visit the residence of a child or places frequented by the child. Transport the child to an appropriate location. So if they're at home and we need to deal with an issue that's going on and the home isn't the best place for us to continue having a dialogue with them, we may go to another place, Department of Social Development, other premises that we use. Interview and examine the child with or without the parent. That has been very controversial because people say, well, it's my child. How are you taking my child and you want to have a conversation? I'm not involved in that. When you're conducting an investigation, you really do not know what the details are, okay? And unfortunately, we have parents who harm children, okay? And if we had the parents there, in some instances, we may be silencing that child. And it might be necessary for us to ask that parent not to be in that space. 9 times out of 10, we get compliance with that. And my take is that if you've got nothing to hide, there's not a problem. We interview the parent. trying to get more information that maybe the child's not able to give to us. Interview any persons who care for the child. Might be a childminder, it might be a teacher, grandma, grandpa, etc. And complete a social inquiry report. Now, a lot of the time we have to go to the court with these matters. The court will require that we write a report that details why it is that this child is in need of care and protection. So we can't just say, oh yes, I feel so because I talked to them, I feel so. We have to give detail. Examination of mental and physical and emotional health of the child. It happens a lot more with regards to sexual abuse that we do seek the assistance of the health authority in doing examinations. We also have the clinical psychologists who may do an assessment in terms of where that child is, in terms of their learning ability. Request an examination of parents' health, strange one. We have instances where the parents might have an illness, where we might need to check where and what stages is this at in terms of being able to adequately look after this child, and what other support mechanisms we might have to put in place to ensure the child's safety. School principal allows direct access to a child without parental consent or knowledge. It's within the Act, and I know that some schools have been a little bit worried, if the parents come, etc. So if you've heard this today, you can say to them, it is within the Child Protection Act 2019. Direct them to that space so you're confident that it's there. Why and how is a child removed from their home? So Section 42. If the commissioner, and remember it's delegated to social workers, has reasonable grounds to believe that a child is in need of protection and the health or safety of the child is in immediate jeopardy. So we don't go into a home and immediately remove a child. We have to have the grounds. What is it that's causing us to believe leaving them there is dangerous? In some instances, we've been to a home and we can see physically that the child has been harmed. And the child is telling you that if you leave me here, this is what's going to happen. We would remove on those grounds. So then who has responsibility for a child who's removed from parents? So Section 45, if a child is removed from the care of her parents, the child shall be kept in an approved childcare service, remember I talked about the place of safety earlier on, or other alternative accommodation at the discretion of the commissioner. And I put the place of safety here at the end. Apart from the place of safety, we also have foster carers, and in some instances we move children to foster carers who will provide that support. The commissioner shall have the care responsibility for the child. So any child that comes within our remit and they're removed from the parents, the commissioner or the Department of Social Development has that responsibility. So then what gives us some of the powers to do some of those things would be orders. And at the beginning I told you there was a section on orders. So what are the types of orders that can be established? So we're looking at Section 53, Section 61, Section 62, and Section 69. The court may place a child who was removed under any of the following orders. So emergency care and protection order. A child is removed from a place in accordance with Section 42 and is satisfied that the child is suffering or likely to suffer significant harm and is in urgent need of care and protection. And that's within 14 days. A supervision order. So a supervision or interim supervision order placing the child under the supervision of the commissioner while leaving the child in the custody of their parents. And that can happen over 6 months. Because sometimes we're saying, well, we don't want to go to that full extent. The child may be all right here if we just keep an eye on things. And then there's a care order placing a child in the care of the commissioner for up to 3 years. So in terms of permanency planning, because we always have to look at planning for children and what's going to be happening for them more long term. So do all children return to their parents? So Section 84 talks about reunification with parents is the primary goal for all children. So wherever possible, we want them to grow up in their biological family, okay? Unfortunately, there are circumstances where that cannot happen. But prior to the return of a child to parents, the commissioner, social workers, shall assess whether there's a realistic possibility of the child being returned to their parents, based on whether the circumstances or issues which led to the removal of the child were addressed. So was it that the child was being left at home for long periods of time, a 5-year-old, and mum was going down the road to a friend, but everything else was happening okay with that child? They're being fed, they're being dressed, they're going to school, etc. But there's a little worry that that child is not safe in the night because mum might be going out. A care plan might be drawn up where you're saying, okay, we're going to do these checks, we want to see that you're doing this, or you're taking the child with you when you're going. And if we see that there is adherence to that, we might be saying, okay, it's time that we no longer need to be involved with this. What are the conditions for foster care placements? Last year we had a very big foster care campaign, which was led by Miss Curleen Webster, who's in the unit, recruiting foster carers because, like I said to you earlier, the best place for a child to grow up is in a family setting. So if they can't be in their own families, we would prefer that they're with foster carers as opposed to being in the place of safety. Not because the place of safety isn't a nice place, but children like to be in a family setting. And it's better for them, via research, that they thrive better in that environment. So within Section 91, the conditions for foster care placements are predicated on the application of the following principles. Hear that phrase again. The best interest of the child remains paramount. The environment or home in which the child is placed provides care that is safe, positive, and nurturing. It promotes the educational, social, and developmental well-being of a child. It allows a child to receive the services or support that meet their individual needs to enhance their physical, emotional, cognitive, social, and cultural development. So children get placed with us, and people might say, well, do the parents contribute financially? You know, we never got money. All right. The court can actually make an order that the parent does contribute when their child has been removed. So the court may order a parent to contribute towards the care of their child who was placed in an approved childcare service. Parents whose financial circumstances may have changed can make a request to the court to have the order varied in accordance to their means, which is very similar to our Maintenance of Children Act, where the other partner who is not, where the children don't live, has to pay maintenance to the other partner for the child. Excuse me, does a child have to be present at any hearing under this act? At this time, children do come to the court because the magistrate and what we call assessors want to hear the voice of the child. And we think that that's admirable, that they're wanting to do that, and it does fall in place within the Act. However, in certain circumstances, under Section 107, it is not necessary for a child who is subject of a hearing to be present unless the court directs otherwise. If a child is required to provide evidence, Section 107 allows for such to be done via video recorded statements, a written statement, transcript from a previous court proceedings. Are child protection matters open or private hearings? I think by now you probably know the answer to that one because I've talked about things being confidential. So under Section 105, all child protection matters must be private hearings. Only the parents, guardians of the child, social workers, counsel, and the child over 12 years and older may remain in the court. So even sometimes other social workers who are there, we're there with our colleagues, because it's not a matter that we're involved with, we may be asked to leave the court. Order or agreement for another jurisdiction. Sometimes a child comes to Anguilla and there's an order that's already in place in relation to their protection in another jurisdiction. The Act allows, under Section 111, the Department may assist with, or 111, may assist with enforcing an order that was made in another jurisdiction once the agreement or order aligns with the Child Protection Act 2019 Anguilla and there is sufficient evidence of its validity. Remember earlier, and I talked about the Child Bill, which helped to bring the Child Protection Act 2019 into being, was something that was done regionally, okay? So other regions have very similar acts. Excuse me. What are considered as offences under the Child Protection Act, and what is the likely penalty? So under Section 114, failure to report, failure to comply with a court order, obstruct the actions of authorities under this Act, unlawfully takes a child, unlawful access or contact with a child, interferes with the care of a child, causes a child to be in need of protection. And you may be found guilty of any of the above offences, liable to a summary conviction, a fine not exceeding, that number again, $5,000, and that's EC dollars. Now, all the way through the Act, confidentiality is paramount. And it doesn't say in those words, except for one section, I did find it in Part 2, Section 10J, it says confidentiality of records. But it is implied throughout the Act that it's not anybody else's business really but the child as much as possible. So benefits of the enactment of this Act. Children are looked after, and it's a positive impact on the future of the socio-economics of the country of Anguilla. Now I've done lots of talking, it's my time to stop and to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that may have arisen during this presentation. Thank you. We've got some water. Stunned everybody into silence. Are there any questions or anything that come out of the Act, anything that you're curious about that you feel was not possibly particularly explained? I'm in competition, sorry. Okay. Anything that wasn't particularly explained or things that maybe didn't come up that you think might be there or wonder if they're there? Well, Like I said, last year we did do the recruitment drive for foster carers. That's our kind of first go-to in terms of being able to place a child in a home environment. So people come to us and say they're interested in being foster carers. We'll take names this evening if there are anybody here who wants to become a foster carer. We do a comprehensive assessment, and that assessment is in line with the Child Protection Act in terms of recruiting foster carers. And it's more explained in terms of how the process is done within the Child Protection Regulations 2021, which I hadn't mentioned when I was doing the presentation. And you can see that there's a little bit of difference in terms of when they were enacted. One says 2019 and one says 2021. It just took a little longer in order for some things to be cleared up in terms of how we use that. So foster carers, we follow a process in terms of assessment so that they understand what their roles and responsibilities are in terms of taking a child into their home and keeping them safe. And I also mentioned the place of safety. If we really have to remove children, it's not our first port of call. I hope that I answered that question for you. With family. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. Okay. We might not go directly into getting an order if the parents are going to work in partnership. And a lot of the time, the parents are coming, some of the things that you've said in terms of gaming, etc., they're coming to us. You know, I don't know what to do with this. How can I manage it? What strategies can be used? So we would help and we would supervise in that way, having the child maybe come to us once a week, or we're going to go and visit them in school to check how things are going with this, or checking them at home, doing agreements with that child in terms of their behavior. So there are different tactics that we would use depending on what the issues are. And that's part and parcel of supervising. But an order is really when we've got somebody who's resistant to us working in partnership with them, because the court tries to encourage us to work with families without having to come to them first. Once we get the resistance, that's when the orders have to be put in place. Sure. I mean, you're talking about child abuse, so it doesn't matter if it's a parent or a child that's inflicting that on another child, it's something we would still be involved in. So some things that we've done is, it's not quite to do with that area, but we'll go into the schools and maybe do a session with children around that. We might meet with 2 children who need social workers to be involved. So there might be 2 of us as social workers who are in there with a couple of children who might be involved in that particular activity that's not healthy for them, and work out how it is that we manage that moving forward, drawing a plan or an agreement. So that is something that can be done once it comes to our attention, and we've got that. Just something you said earlier on in terms of more of that needs to happen in terms of supervision. Our numbers are small as social workers, so partnership is key. Sometimes we have to work with a multidisciplinary approach and ask that other people partner with us, by extension, to deal with some of those things. So if we help to set up an agreement, that they're the ones who might supervise and monitor that we're not doing it all the time. And you can lobby your ministers to give us more social workers. For sure. It is specific, and anybody who works with children to begin with really has that responsibility, period. So thank you. Prepared earlier. So mandatory reporting of harm of a child. I mentioned the first section with regards to anyone over 18, but notwithstanding subsection 1 or any other enactment, a person who performs professional or official duties or services with respect to a child, including a physician, nurse, dentist, psychologist, or other healthcare professional, a school principal, teacher, guidance counselor, youth or recreational leader, or member of the clergy, an owner, operator, or employee of a child daycare center or other child care institution, a law enforcement officer, probation officer, or social worker, or any other person who by virtue of his employment or occupation has responsibility to discharge a duty of care towards a child. Very explicit. And children are looking for us to speak out for them, when things are happening. So many things go on and they say, well, such and such knew, and I'd said something to this person, and I understand that sometimes people don't know what to do. But right now, after today, contact the Department of Social Development, contact the police, and you can do it anonymously. Yep, for sure. Sorry. It is a good question. That really is dependent on what the issue is. Now, if the police are involved in something, they may call us they've got a young person that's immediate, okay? Because we have a 24-hour service that operates, so somebody's always on duty. There's always a social worker who's on duty. So dependent on the nature of that, if we're unclear and we're on duty, we would speak to the commissioner or to our director, who's also in the audience, Ms. Daphne Hodge, and we would find out, is this something that we should go and deal with if we're unsure. But most of the social workers are quite seasoned in the department, and we would know if the police call us, we go and deal with that, depending on what time of night it is. Because we're saying all of this, you know, health and safety is a feature for us as well. If it's something that happened late at night and somebody's talking about to go and find their child who's out on the street at that time of night, we'll not be doing that. We will inform the police because it's their responsibility to do things like that. Because sometimes members of the public think that that's part of our responsibility to be walking on the street to look for children. It's not. If we know, if it's like daylight and we know that, okay, George is across the road in that bush, we might go there and try and coerce him to come to us and to talk to us. The school might call us and say, look, this incident has happened, or this child has just told us, disclose this piece of information. We would go to the school immediately and go and speak to that child. So it really is dependent on what the matter is as to whether we deal with it immediately, or there might be some hours that lapse, or there might be some days that lapse, to be honest. Cooperation. Yeah. Yeah. And leave the investigation and assessment to us. Because that's another thing that we've found, is that some people say, well, I didn't want to say anything because I wanted to go and check out if, and you know, I didn't get the opportunity to speak to them properly about this. It can be dangerous. I understand the intent is about being helpful. But we've been trained, and there's particular things and ways that we would deal with a situation in terms of assisting a child to be able to give us information that we can further protect them. And sometimes the information or the situation can reach the court arena, and depending on how it's been dealt with from the beginning, could change the outcome. Confidentiality.
When you report a grievance, ensure that the persons that you've entrusted the information with will take care of it. So that's important.
Yes. Ongoing battle. Like I said, on a personal level, I think that it's wrong. If we're saying that a child is under the age of 18, I do not understand how a child can be enacting in a sexual activity which can produce a whole child, and then who's responsible for that child? That becomes an issue for us, because you want to hear the voice of which child now? Which one are you trying to support and manage at that time? And it's very difficult for parents as well. But we try to we try to go from an educational standpoint in terms of prevention as opposed to cure, by speaking to young people about things that they can do to assist themselves. And in the position where we just get them and they do have a child under the age of 18, we have to work with them and with their parents in everyone's best interests. There's a lot of discussion in terms of what Anguilla's doing as a country in terms of harmonizing it. I'm not sure, but I know there's a lot of undercurrents that are going on at the moment with professionals about this disparity, ambiguity.
Yeah, even so, it is one thing when you give someone responsibility for themselves and try to get back, and that's what happens. All our have given children, to some extent, consent, something that perhaps is awful for them, and you are saying that you want to take that back, and you want to move that is pushback. And also, there are some forces who believe, for whatever reason, that somebody is 16 should be open to get married. And our laws, you can get married after age 16 with the consent of your parents. Between 16 and 18, if your parents give you a hand in marriage, you can get married. But again, these are things that are there when you give some authority to something is happening.
Yeah, and I think the other issue for us is also about the whole thing about grooming. I don't know if you've heard that term before, where somebody is looking at, a perpetrator is looking at a child for sexual gratification. And what they do is that they prepare them so as they can then have them in the way that they want sexually. They know that they're approaching 16. And so what they're doing is doing the grooming. So by the time they get to 16, they can say, well, they gave me consent. It's very difficult for us to fight or, to demonstrate anything else has happened at that point, because at 16, there's consent.
Something like study at the age when you can get your driver's license is 18, and then you try to do that to one who's not.
Well, considering, yeah, but in some places in the Caribbean region, some countries, people can get married at 12, okay? And that's something that has been looked at. Trinidad in particular, I can remember going to a conference years ago, and there was a whole discussion with regards to that, and what that meant in relation to protecting children, particularly females. So have we got any other burning questions or statements, reactions that anybody wants to make at this time? Okay. Well, based on that silence, I will take it that there isn't, and thank you very much for allowing me to do it. The
Thank you very much, Mrs. Carty, and I'm sure that the discussion can continue on social media, on Facebook, because all that hard work that you put into that presentation, as Mrs. Carty also said, is now available to be looked at again and to be continued, and you can get questions. We'll continue to monitor the page if there are questions, and of course they know where to find you. We thank you so much, you and your team, for putting this presentation together. There can never be too much information, so you can never do too many of these sessions, because even those of us who thought we kind of like, we sit and we hear and we absorb and ponder more, and then there are questions to be asked. And that's how, legislation becomes dynamic and as we're growing. So thank you very much, you and your team. Thank you, Carolyn, as well. And thank you, Ms. Gomes, Lorraine, and Frankie, and Daphne, and the rest for, continuing this open partnership with us. We want to recognize, some of our students were here. Some of them have other classes as well. We want to, because of the growing number of students in social work, which I'm sure that you're happy to have people enroll in social work, because one of the questions that we didn't ask, how do you have the capacity in terms of, personnel, based on the way we see Anguilla going or growing. We can surmise that you are, being stretched in lots of directions. So those persons like Sasha and all the rest of them who are here as well, are in a field that is expanding and is necessary for the positive development of Anguilla, and hopefully the work, as more persons get involved and more persons get aware of legislation and of our social and ethical responsibilities as people living on Anguilla, and as responsible adults as well, that we would ensure the protection of our children. Because as much legislation as we would have, legislation won't do it if we ourselves don't take that to heart and begin to practice and act. And most of it we would know from our Christian principles or just our social responsibilities that this is the right thing to do. We know that some of the issues or some of the parts of the law that you would have raised, so my child at 13 can say they don't want me to know something. Those are kinds of things that we would continue to debate. But such as the world is going and as Anguilla is going, and in the end it is about child protection. And so those in our churches, in our homes, with our parenting styles where we're acting, ignorance is no excuse. The law is the law, and the Department of Social Development continues to do its part to ensure that we are aware of the law, and so that we won't be in contravention. So again, thank you so much. We know that even putting this together, 118 segments, and summarizing it so clearly for us, that's a lot of work, and we really appreciate it, and thank you. In relation, I think one of the questions that we had there that wasn't asked was about the uptake in the foster care program, for the foster care program. That has been one of the things that we at the department, at UE Open Campus, really, have taken on board. We were able to raise some funds at the International Women's Day service last year, and we already have raised some more again, and we hope that we can exceed what we did last year. But that will continue to be something that we will partner, and so maybe in the next week we'll be presenting that check towards that program. And I say that now because we also want to make the pitch right now to others out there. Foster care, as you would see, it all depends where the support for the children comes, depending on the parents, and that's not always necessary. The department sometimes has a challenging time with this foster alternative care, that's the word, yeah, that's the term, program in terms of of having that financial support to get the little things. And Lorraine and we were talking about what exactly is needed sometimes, and it's like little things. So if you have a donation, go by the department, or call somebody. We make sure it's all put down receipt and recorded. That's why we thank the Anglican Church women and the Anglican Church. They are kind of making sure they're doing the auditing of the collection of the monies to make sure that that is done properly as well. So even if you weren't able to give during the International Women's Day service that we hosted last week, yes, we can get the checks, we can give you the account numbers, or you can call the Department of Social Development or UE Open Campus and continue to support that, because they're very simple things that they're looking for us to support. So again, during Social Work Month, and we would have celebrated Social Work Day on Tuesday, we want to take this time to thank you. It was hashtag Thank a Social Worker. As we know, in the Department of Social Development, some of them, they're in probation, they're in other areas as well. So we want to say again, we salute the social workers everywhere, including you here, and thank you for the job that you continue to do. And you can know that we have your support, and we are appealing to all of those out there we're viewing, whether now or afterwards. Thank a social worker, contribute to the programs if you're here in Anguilla as well as overseas. We can work that out, and continue to make sure that we are doing our part in safeguarding and protecting our children. We want to thank CleanStream for partnering with us this evening to ensure this live broadcast, and and also that people who couldn't be here could also participate in this deliberation. We want to thank Radio Anguilla for carrying it live and interrupting their programs to carry it live. And we want to thank those of you who came out in person, because that's very important, because I don't think Angeline would have liked talking to an empty room. So we really appreciate it, and thank you very much, and continue to do our part. Thank you.